Hello there and welcome to Candid Cruises. Today I'm joined by Johanna Grove, destination specialist, and Adam Coulter, editor of the fabulous Cruise Critic website. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. Now, destination specialist, Johanna, I want to dive straight in there and say, let's discuss the merits of going on, a specialist trip with the ship, a sort of official ship's trip, or whether it's better sometimes to just go off-piste and do your own thing.
I think there's merit in both, to be honest. I'm lucky enough to have done both. I worked on board ships for about 10 years, working with the official shore excursions, and work now with a company that does independent excursions, and I think there's merit in both. It depends what you want as a cruiser, to be honest with you. A lot of people go on a cruise ship shore excursion because they like the safety net of knowing that the ship will never sail without you. You do obviously pay over the odds for that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people feel like you're offered the same thing over and over, year on year. A lot of people cruise time and time again. We know that once you've done one, you're hooked, aren't you?
Yeah.
And I think, I think people get tired of doing the same thing on huge coaches with massive groups. And I think there's quite a lot of value in looking for something smaller.
So where do you fit in as an independent excursion provider? So you don't book through the ship. How would you book an excursion with you, say?
Online.
Okay.
You can call us and book. I think it totally depends what you want. We specialise in small group tours. One of the biggest complaints we ever got on board was, I've spent 15 minutes of my tour waiting for the lady at the front of the bus to get off. And I think a lot of people feel like time is wasted by being on, on huge coaches.
Yeah.
I think a lot of these independent companies that are coming up through the ranks now are picking up on little niches that people are unhappy with going on the big tours. And I think if you can get a smaller group, you learn more from your guide, because if you're on a walking tour, you're not stuck right at the back of a huge group of people not being able to hear. There's just a few of you. You can go to nicer restaurants. If you're on a full-day tour, you don't necessarily need to stop in a huge hotel.
Yeah.
We can take you to a taverna where you can feel a little bit of culture and eat the local food. But it's down to everybody's choice. There's so much choice out there now.
Yeah.
I think the best thing you can do is do a little bit of research about what you want to see and what sort of experience you want before you go.
Absolutely. Would you agree with that, Adam?
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. I think those big tours can be problematic sometimes, when you're talking about buses and buses of people turning up to some beautiful place like Pompeii or Ephesus, and it's overwhelming, with all those people around. But you can get private tours booked through the cruise ship as well, can't you? You can get smaller ones, you can get more bespoke ones. Obviously, you're paying quite a lot of money for them.
Okay.
But, if you get together with 2 families, 3 families, for example, and you share a little minibus, which we did in St. Lucia, that was a really nice thing to do. So, you're not going off with the big
That's great.
buses and stuff, for example.
I know you can do that on river cruise ships. I didn't realise you could do it so much on ocean ships as well.
Yeah, you can do it. If you speak to the shore excursion people, and that's what you did, didn't you? You used to do the shore excursion stuff, then they can organise that for you.
Yeah.
The other option is, I think, if you know somewhere very well, let's say, I don't know, a typical Western Mediterranean port like Barcelona, say you've been there on short breaks, you probably feel very comfortable jumping in a cab because the port itself is very near the town.
Yeah.
Head to the bottom of the Ramblas. Just do it on your own. You don't need to have any excursion.
Yeah.
If you want to do something a little bit special or different, private tours of this, that and the other, the Sagrada Familia Cathedral or something, then maybe you need to be thinking about booking through a specialist.
Yeah.
But as I say, if you know somewhere, just go on your own.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
I think it's about being an explorer rather than a cruiser. I think if you go on a cruise as a cruiser, then you're there for the ship. You might see a little bit of your destinations. But if you're going on holiday as an explorer and you want to see these things, I think it's very easy, if you haven't booked anything, to come off the ship, get in a taxi and pay over the odds.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you're brave enough to think, well, let's walk a little way, and you get a taxi from outside the port, you'll pay half the money and get exactly the same service. So I think, again, it's about doing a little bit of research, knowing what you want to see, because you can't just jump in a taxi and say, can you take me somewhere?
No.
You need to have a bit of an idea about what the highlights are, what you want to...
You can, we did, and we got ripped off right royally, you know, take us to the best sort of places. I think I like going off-piste, but I think for me, the time to do a sort of proper ship's excursion is if it's like you're in Russia to go to the ballet, something you couldn't do yourself, or to swim with dolphins or turtles, things that would take an enormous amount of, well, not enormous, but a considerable amount of arranging yourself. When the ship's done it all for you, and it's a jam-packed excursion.
Yeah, and also
that's worth the money.
If you don't feel 100% with the place that you're going to.
Yes, sometimes a place feels a little dangerous.
Yeah.
You know, some of the ports of call.
Yeah.
Not, you know, obviously a ship will always try and err on the side of being as safety cautious as possible, but inevitably you might visit some places that feel a little tricky.
And the other thing is that, I mean, there are some ports, give some examples, Marseille, Civitavecchia, for Rome, you know, these ports are miles away. So if you do want to explore, you're exploring really in a sort of a dockyard.
Yes.
And a really not, you know, no offence to Civitavecchia or that dock area in Marseille, but it's not really where you want to see or go. So you need to, again, that's essential to do your research, because then you realise, well, you're 20 minutes away. And often the cruisers put on these shuttle buses, which is quite nice. So again, you jump on one of them. Yeah. Sometimes they charge, often they're free, and then you just go into town on those, you know. Yeah. So that's another way of doing it.
But it depends as well, I think, on how new to cruising you are.
Yes.
When I first went to Civitavecchia, I thought, I was suddenly scared that we wouldn't get back in time, because by the time we'd got into Rome and then looked around and come back, we were running out of time.
That's it. Yeah. And plus as well, people don't realise that the Italian rail networks are a little bit hit and miss. I've been on board countless ships where we've left people behind because they've gone into Rome independently on the train because it costs a couple of euros in comparison to a go your own way transfer. Thought, well, we'll save a couple of extra pounds and we'll get the train. And then while they were in Rome, there was a train strike, just like that.
Seriously?
Yeah, they didn't have enough time to get back to the ship, so we waved them off as we went. Yeah.
And this does, I mean, because I've only experienced it once, somebody not getting on board, and we knew that they must still be in the port because the announcement goes out endlessly.
It goes out,
they've obviously not boarded. Yeah. But a ship will go, won't it?
As a rule, yes.
It will, it does, yeah. It does. It's not going to wait.
No.
I mean, if for example, if it's a busload of people, or if, as you say, if it's an official shore excursion, they will wait.
They will wait because
but generally they've got to go. I mean, they've got to get to the next port, you know, and that's not so bad on a river cruise because you can virtually walk to the next port. But on an ocean cruise, you know, you're going to have to make your own way there. I do emphasise this happens rarely. But it can happen.
Yeah.
I think it's down to, you know, the discretion of the captain with the security officer, and, you know, they will leave a period of grace. If you're on a shore excursion, even if it's an independent shore excursion, what happens is independent shore tour companies that are based in the UK work with the local agents.
Okay.
So they... You know, if a tour is running late, the local agent will advise the ship and say, listen, we've got a busload of 10 people who are on their way back. Can you hold on? And as a rule, you know, there is a grace period while they wait. But it is scary. It is scary. And you hear the announcement going out and everybody rushes over to the side of the ship to look down and say, oh, we're going to see some people running over across the quayside to get back. Yeah. I've seen it. I've seen it.
My daughter and I were running. We didn't keep the ship waiting, but we were the last passengers to board. We'd both had pedicures, and the girl was saying, "No, your nail varnish is smudged." It was like, forget the nail varnish.
We've got to run. It is scary. Yeah, I've been in that position where I've got the departure time wrong, and you know, and you assume it's about 5 o'clock most days.
Yes.
And we came ambling back to the ship. We were in Denmark at the time at about 3:30, and there's people waving their Union Jacks up on the top decks, and the band was playing. We suddenly thought, oh my goodness, I've never run so fast. Yeah, it does. Yeah. Gets your heart racing.
Do you know what I do now? Because especially if you're on quite a long cruise and the time of, you know, sort of embarkation is always fairly the same. Yeah. But you might be wrong, like you were. I take a photograph of the board saying be back at a certain time, because you know you've got it on your phone, on your mobile at that moment.
Well, but then you make sure that you change your change the hour as well. Something which I didn't do. So I was on UK time.
Oh no!
Oh, Adam,
it was on my phone. It was on a Holland American line Koningsdam cruise, and we were in Palermo in Sicily, and I was working on my computer. Actually, I'd gone to find an internet cafe, and I was on UK time 1 hour behind, thinking, oh, I've got an hour, it's fine. Fortunately, I could see the ship. And then I started getting text messages from the people that I knew on board, and I was the last person on board. My name was being called.
Oh,
so yeah, I didn't miss it. But that was a real schoolboy error, and
Yeah.
I'd never done that before, and I haven't done it since. Yeah.
I think everyone only does it once.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because it's the shame. You get on board, all the security people are going, oh, what were you doing? You know, and all this, and then I had to meet the colleagues in the bars after and said, oh, we heard your name being called, you know.
Don't.
So it was a little bit shameful, but it's funny, you know. But I didn't miss it, but I was the last one on board.
Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah.
And listen, stay with us. Don't miss our second half, because we're coming right back after the break. Hello, thanks for joining us. You're watching Candid Cruises, and I'm with Adam Coulter and Johanna Grove. Can I call you Jo?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. Now, you're destination specialist, editor of Cruise Critic. I've got to ask you, favourite destination or favourite shore excursion, which we were just talking about?
Oh my goodness, I'm lucky enough to have been to a lot of places. My favourite shore excursion actually was a private tour of the Hermitage Museum in St Petersburg in the evening.
That's
they serve champagne and canapes,
And
and
no
you
crowds.
listen to a string orchestra playing in one of the museum rooms. It was absolutely
Now, that's
breathtaking.
worth booking a proper tour for.
Without a doubt. Who would be able to do that on their own? You know, I've been around the Hermitage Museum during the day, and there are crowds of thousands of
elbowing
people.
your way through, isn't it?
Yes, and you know, 40 or 50 of you crowded around, you know, a painting like that. You can't see anything.
Yeah.
So to go in the evening on a private tour and tour the museum was just breathtaking. One of those tours where you sat there, and I'm not really into classical music, but to sit there with a glass of champagne listening to this amazing orchestra, that was fantastic.
Yeah. Great, good one.
I can't top that. I can't top it. No, I mean, I go for something completely different. We had a really lovely shore excursion on St Lucia. I think I mentioned it before the break. We were with another family. We met through the kids club and stuff, and we hired this minibus, and we went to this active volcano called Soufriere in St Lucia, where it's billed as the Caribbean's only drive-in volcano. So we drove in, and the kids were just fascinated by it. There was, you know, there's hot vapours and it stinks of sulphur, and you can have one of these spa mud baths and things like
brilliant.
that. It was just absolutely magical. Kids, you can't actually go down in it because apparently he used to, and a guide fell in. He's okay. He only went up to his waist, and he's still, apparently you can meet the guy down in town. But so they blocked that off. But you look down on the sort of molten lava bubbling and stuff.
There's like a crust.
There's a crust,
like a
and it's constantly bubbling, and you know, amazing.
What a great thing to do, because excellent for the adults, fascinating, but for the kids,
it was just mind-blowing.
Imagine when they write about it at school. You know, what did you do in your holidays?
So it was a bit different from a private concert rehearsal in the Hermitage, but it was really lovely. It was a great Caribbean experience.
Yes, and it just shows you the kind of the gamut of things that you can do when you're on a ship. I mean, the world really is your oyster.
I think tours like that, where all of your senses are kind of immersed, they're the ones, especially for kids, where they'll go home and say, oh, do you remember when we went to that place and it's really stank of rotten eggs?
Yes, rotten eggs.
But that's what they'll remember.
Yeah.
You know, that's
and
a real day
stinks of
out.
rotten eggs afterwards.
Absolutely,
that's really
absolutely.
lovely.
Okay, now I'm going to just move on to a very thorny subject. Okay, tipping. Does one tip your guide on an excursion? Do you tip your waiter, your cabin steward, your stateroom steward? Tipping. It's probably the most contentious thing, isn't it? Certainly in Britain. Would you agree?
Shall I start?
Go ahead.
Well, tipping is the number one hot topic on our boards in terms of conversation from our members. Yeah, on the UK ones, because tipping in the US it's part of the culture.
Yeah.
It's more acceptable. Tipping can be approached in a number of ways. Oftentimes, when you book your cruise, you actually prepay for your tips. which sounds really odd to a British person, but what it does, it makes sure you don't have to worry about it when you get there. And a P&O cruise is, from memory, is £5 per person per day, which is not too bad, because that is spread out amongst all the people that serve you throughout the day, right from your cabin steward up to not the maitre d', but the people who serve you at dinners and things like that. That's actually very reasonable, £5 per person per day. And I think Fred Olsen and other UK ships are about the same. It's a lot more expensive when you go on the American ships. Yeah. You know, you're talking about upwards of $12, $13, $15, depending what type of cabin you're in. You times that for a family of 4, that's a lot of money. Now, I'm not going to name ships by all lines, but you can, I'm right in thinking on P&O cruises, you can take those tips off. If you really are unhappy with your service at the end of the cruise, you can do that. On other lines, I'm not sure what the policies are, but and then if you feel that you want to, you can individually tip people, which I often do. You know, someone who's been really wonderful with my kids, for example, or someone who's gone out of their way to help with things. That's on board. Shore excursions, I think that's pretty normal that you would give a couple of dollars or a couple,
if it's been a very good guide.
If it's been a good guide, I think that's fairly standard, and then none of that is sort of pre-booked or even expected. So. I don't know what your views are on tipping.
Can I just jump in and ask, because I want to just comment on that, if I may. I know you can take your name off the sort of the list. I've heard if you do, that it's known about, and you know, you are not blacklisted amongst some of the waiters, but it's known about, and I don't know.
Interesting, I don't know.
I don't know about that side of things.
There are names. It could be a complete rumour.
But some people feel more comfortable about doing it in the British way. You get good service, you pay. You don't pay up front for service that you're going to receive.
Yes.
And I think that's the thing that you have to figure out yourself, where you feel comfortable about. And some people go on board and they think they do it initially and they say, right, I don't want to prepay the tips, but I'm going to pay as I go, which, you know, obviously it gets fiddlier because you're going to have carry a lot of money with you, or you give it all at the end. Yeah. So it's a very thorny issue. You're absolutely right. And I don't have the answers. I'm just painting the picture of what it's like.
I've got a friend who always says, I'm going to actually pay you myself, and I'm going to give you half now, and I'm going to give you more when you finish. So he gets really good service throughout because he gives something up front and something at the end.
But Julie, can I just say just one thing before we? Yeah. And it sounds a bit cheesy, but I think you'll probably agree. The service levels on cruise ships are off the scale anyway.
Absolutely
it's not like going
amazing.
to some rubbish old restaurant, someone's in a bad mood that day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Everybody that touches you in some way is working so hard.
So hard.
And they're so kind, and they always smile. I know that sounds cheesy, but
it doesn't sound
if people
cheesy,
haven't been on a cruise ship, go and experience it, because you're cocooned in this, and then you come off in the real world and you're like, oh, that person didn't smile at me.
They didn't say good morning.
They didn't say good morning.
I wholeheartedly
so you feel you want to. I think most people would feel they want to. Sorry to interrupt.
No,
I absolutely agree.
Service is second to
That's
none.
amazing.
Everybody works so hard. Jo, sorry.
I think I don't know how tipping on board works. I think as a Brit, I think we often question, number one, does it get to the people that are actually serving us? And number two, if the tips are paid up front, and the waiting staff, for example, aren't expecting anything at the end, is that going to affect the service? You know, back in the day, were people working harder, knowing the harder I work, the more tips I'm going to get from this particular table? Yeah. I don't know. I know that some lines you can opt out to, and I think I'm wondering if it's just us Brits really that would opt out of that, because we like to be in control of what we do. You know, we want to. You know, if I really appreciate what you're doing, I would like to tip you. That person over there's had nothing to do with me.
Yes, exactly.
I'd like my money to go to you.
Yes.
So I don't.
Because you've made that personal connection.
But that's pertinent if you've got the same table in the same dining room.
True. Every night.
If you're just sort of free dining and getting different waiters, different restaurants, then it's hard to be, you know, sort of specific about a sort of waiter or the steward or whatever.
I mean, I think, you know, the tipping up front or in the package when you book your cruise works for example, the speciality restaurants on board. Because if you're going to pay extra for one of the speciality restaurants, how many people leave a tip on the table?
That's a good point.
And you might only visit that restaurant once or twice in the cruise, whereas you may tip your, you know, the waiters on your actual table or your cabin steward that you see every day. Yes. But the people who are working, doing, you know, the really posh meals and, you know, the really special nights out, they're the ones that might miss out. I don't know. I don't know. I've got really split views about the whole thing, to be honest.
Yeah, it is very contentious. You were telling me though, both of you, that travelling with the obviously it is the culture in the States, and Australians, do they tip? Are they very generous or the opposite?
Well, I mean,
in a generalisation.
From what I understand, the Australians are very similar to the Brits. They're reluctant to pay tips, and I think they question also that I think a lot of them think, well, why doesn't the cruise line just include it, bundle it into the fare? Why are we paying tips anyway? And from what I understand, a couple of cruise lines have gone down to Australia, and I think Royal was one, and they changed their policy. So there's a no tips policy because the Australians just weren't abiding by it. So they're more similar to the Brits.
It is a cultural thing as well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But some cruise lines tips are included, by the way.
Yes, they are.
The more luxury ones. So you don't even have to think about it because it's bundled into your fare.
And I kind of like that.
Which makes it quite nice, quite comfortable. You don't have to worry about it because you know, well, you hope, assume, like you say, you don't know if it is definitely going to them. You hope that it is.
You hope that it is.
Yeah, but it takes that worry away.
Thompson do it too, Adam.
Thompson do it. We should mention that, definitely, which is a British line, and they include it.
They do. And I tell you what I always try and do is you can get that little form at the end, sort of, has anybody been particularly, feedback form, anybody been particularly good on the cruise? I always try and fill that in, because I think that they do seem to, that does seem to be noted.
Do you know, when I worked on board, we had a lot of questions about that, you know, what's the point of filling these in? Every single one of those forms is read.
Oh, that's good to know.
Every one is scanned, and then each department are sent their section about how well you did this cruise and how well you did that cruise, and this person has been recognised over and over again, and that's really nice. And you do get to the end of the cruise. And as crew on board, you're waiting for the scans to come out to think, did anyone mention me? And we did a great job.
That's a really nice, I didn't know that. It's a nice insight.
Every single one is read.
Great.
Good. Well, so everybody must fill in that card at the end.
You must fill in your forms. Thank you, Jo. Thank you, Adam. Thank you for watching. Fill in your forms. Don't forget, and join us next time for Candid Cruises. See you soon.